Well, welcome. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. I am super excited to be here and to start this panel off. Welcome to the Global Emergency Medicine Academy sponsored panel on empowering women through emergency care system development in LMICs. And this is such an important and timely conversation. And there is so much that can be said, so much that should be said on this topic, that this is just part of a conversation that is ongoing at SAEM, at CUGH, at Women Global Leaders in Health. This is happening all over the place, and this is just one point in that conversation. And so what we hope today is that what we talk about is going to be a catalyst for future conversations, for future action, and that we continue this discussion, not just today in this 50 minutes that we have, but as you leave the room with each other and with your partners. And what we're talking about today is specifically empowerment, and I think that that's actually an important term to just start with, right? If you talk to folks around the world, your colleagues, your partners, it means it's something a little bit different to everyone. And for me, the definition that I always keep going back to is this one. It's the process by which those who have been denied the ability to make strategic life choices acquire such an ability. And I love that definition because it acknowledges the fact that this is decades and centuries of women and other folks who have been denied the ability to make these life choices, and that this is an active process and undoing of that. And it can be done many different ways. It can be done by increasing access to resources, by increasing the agency of folks, their feelings of self-efficacy, whether they feel like they can make change happen, and through achievement in and of itself. And so today we're not going to talk about kind of facts and stats and things like that, but we're going to talk about the what and the how. And to do that, we're going to share some stories with you of our experiences, our personal experiences, things that we've seen. And so to do that, to start that off, I want to start with a very specific story of one of the pioneers in emergency medicine in Tanzania. So this is the story of Dr. Upendo George.
We had little access to doctors. Emergency medicine did not exist. When I was young, people were dying of curable diseases. It wasn't right that women only became wives and mothers. I wanted to be different. The hero of my favorite book were female doctors. That inspired me to dream of life beyond the walls of my home, even when people said that only men became doctors.
What I love about this short clip is, in a few words, she's really described a story I think many of us have heard when we've talked to women from around the world. But it also is about the story of emergency medicine, which I believe, and I think our panelists believe, has unrecognized value, unrecognized potential in the world of development to empower women. We have the ability to do this through systems development, through the way that we design research, create research teams, execute research, through our educational activities, and through workforce growth and sustainability. And so when we think about emergency medicine as it grows in low and middle income countries, we're at a very special point in emergency medicine. We're at the beginning of our story, right? We've watched this grow since the 60s, 70s, 80s on in the US, and it's always come from the roots of social justice. So what will this mean now as we grow it in LMICs? Where will we take this story? How can we be deliberate? And so to hear from the people that are pushing that forward and doing that on the ground, I'd like to introduce our panelists today. We have Dr. Jennifer Chan, go ahead and raise your hand, who's an associate professor at Northwestern University, working mostly within disaster response and conflict settings, looking at data information systems. We have Kelli O'Laughlin, hello, our future president of GEMA and an assistant professor at Harvard University, working mostly with refugee health and HIV. We have Frida Shayo, who comes all the way from Tanzania, who is an R2, current resident at Muhimbili National Hospital. We also have Catherine Staton, who is from Duke and an associate professor doing fantastic work in trauma registries, TBI, and alcohol use. And then we have Janis Tupesis from Wisconsin, who's the associate director at the University of Wisconsin-Madison Global Health Institute. And each of these folks brings a range of wonderful experiences. But to get us started, I'm wondering if I can turn to you, Catherine and Frida, to help us with the first question. I'm actually going to take a seat if that's okay. And I might borrow it real quick.
Okay. Sorry. So the first question.
So I wondered if you could tell us, and Frida, if you as well, about kind of what empowerment means to you, and kind of share with us your stories of what it's meant for you, especially with being emergency medicine practitioners. Okay?
So a little bit about me. So my emergency medicine practice is mainly a research practice, but a research practice focusing on injury specifically in low and middle income countries. I've had the ability through my research to live in Tanzania, in northern Tanzania, and work at KCMC. And during that time, I've tried to integrate a lot of sort of capacity building within my research at different levels. Personally, I'm a big sufferer of imposter syndrome. I think all along the way, it's been really very difficult for me to not only know that this was the path I would choose, but also know that I could choose this path or that it was a possibility. And so I think that the empowerment for me is to those around me who did let me know that this is an opportunity and a path and it's possible to do this. And specifically in emergency medicine, I knew that was the field for me, not only because of my very short attention span, but because it gives you this broad overview of sort of the whole health system. It lets you see everything and collaborate with other people, which is how I love to work, both research and collaboration. I think EM fosters this calmness in chaos, and I think that that personally has helped me both in my life as well as in my clinical work and research work. And so the empowerment and the pull to emergency medicine, I think, has been very helpful in most of those fields. And then it's multidisciplinary, right? We never just see a patient on our own, very infrequently. And so to be able to learn from each of the groups has been very empowering for me to learn constantly and daily, a lifelong learning. So that's been my experience and how empowered I've been to get to where I am. So, Frida?
Hi. So this is my story. Of course, after I'm done with my undergrad, I was just a voluntary doctor. So I met with Catherine, then he gave me a chance to go to residence. So that is the meaning of empowerment to me, given a chance. And she told me I can do it. So that is empowering me because I can do it now. I see it's an emergency, it's a good field. Of course, I like it. It's a field where you can, you can see a change in just 5 minutes of your met with a patient. So it's a good field. And I think it's not about all about empowering in terms of fee, school fee, but also it's empowering about being being empowered to know you can do, to being responsible. Many tasks at the same time, but you can do it in a way you can save patients at just 5 minutes. So that's empowering. You can do it. Just going on, you can do it. So I think that's empowerment. It's just about economy. It's about ability, about to recognize yourselves. It gives you a way you know who you are. Yes, that's more of empowering. Yeah. So.
No. I think that that's a great point. That there's the economic element to
yes.
it, right? But that also it's about. I mean, there's something so special about emergency medicine and being in the room, right?
Yeah.
And running that room, running that code. What's great and interesting about the two of you, you both work in Tanzania now.
Yeah.
Catherine from the U.S. and you from Tanzania, and actually being the first female physician from or emergency medicine physician from Kilimanjaro region.
Yeah.
But how would you say it's different around something like you both are mothers, right? And you mentioned to me when you first had the opportunity, you were pregnant with your second child.
Yes.
So kind of talk to us about, what's different, or what have you guys talked about that's maybe different in how that's handled becoming residents,
Yeah, I'm going to start out, and I'll come less from the resident standpoint, but I'll come from the cultural aspect of it. So for me, it's been a learning experience. So to live in Tanzania, I need a residency permit, and so my children are on my residency permit, but my husband, who has a mobile job, can't be on my residency permit because men can't be on women's permit. If I were a man, my wife could be on my permit, but not the other way around. And when we talk about that, that's a representative of pretty much how most of the culture is accepted, that men get the jobs, women and families move to where the man's job is. And so it's very different for a woman to get a position and to move to Dar es Salaam to do her residency, et cetera. And so that ingrained cultural role and aspect is just far stronger than I had anticipated before I went there. And it very much impacted sort of what was happening. So I was very proud to be able to be pregnant when in Tanzania doing my work, and so to model that behavior that you can do both and you can have both experiences, even when most of the team is elsewhere. But it was hard because a lot of our hiring practices kept us away from hiring women of childbearing age because of difficulties with maternity leave. So I was others who were around me said not to hire women, especially of childbearing age, because of the fact that they could get pregnant and leave, and they would be gone for 3 months for their maternity leave, and then 6 months for their breastfeeding leave. They'd only work part-time, and you have no financial recourse or assistance with that from a research standpoint. So it was a hard decision to make, to sort of buck culture and to say I'll choose the best person regardless of their gender and status and choice of having a family or not. Do you have something to add?
Yeah. So in our residence, in our program, we normally we don't have a maternity when you're a student, because in residence you are a student. They don't pay you like here in Europe. So if you're a student, if you are pregnant, it's all under your own. So I was pregnant also when I was started at of course, I was just gave birth with my 6-month child. So it was difficult, but I have support to my mother. Of course, she lives where I'm doing my residence, so she was there to help me for all the support of the child. But in our society, sometimes it's difficult because they just look you as a student, no maternity. So I have even a fellow, 2 residents who dropped their study because of the pregnancy issues. So they need, I think, support. Maybe you can do for policy changes, some challenges to these females doctors. Yeah.
No, I think those are great opportunities, right?
Yeah.
Great opportunities to support you both through networks of fellow moms, but also can we advocate for policy change?
Yeah.
And so I want to maybe kind of pitch this over to Janis and Kelli about what are some unique opportunities that you guys have seen in your work in developing emergency care systems or education to empower women, whether that's colleagues or women who are using emergency medicine as patients. What are some of those special things that you've been able to do or that you've seen other people do?
I'm Kelli O'Laughlin. Some background in terms of what I do is I do research in Uganda focusing on understanding health behaviors and health utilization and designing health interventions in a refugee settlement. So my work now is in Nache Valley Refugee Settlement in Uganda, and in that capacity I have a research team of 7 people. 4 of them are women, and they're all refugees. So these 4 women from Africa, refugees, have been on my team with me now for a number of years. And I have had the unique opportunity to be with them as a friend and a boss and a mentor to witness some of the challenges and barriers that they've had to overcome just to get into the position that they are in. Some of the things that I am most grateful for in my own research. In research, there's some setback. There's good things and there's bad things. And when I have a bad day, I'm like, well, at least I have a really great research team. So if I'm doing anything, at least we're working together as a team, and that's nice. So I have watched our research team learn amazing technical skills that they didn't have before in terms of using mobile online devices to collect data, working with Excel, just doing really impressive computer things that they hadn't done before. It's really awesome. And then I've also seen through the years I've been able to help them, but also watch them take on leadership opportunities, specific roles within our team, and also just to go and share our work with our colleagues at United Nations High Commission for Refugees, or with our local NGOs that we're collaborating with to give updates. And being on this panel is really humbling, though, working with these great colleagues, because what I've realized, I'm thankful that I've had some unique opportunity to provide a little bit of opportunities, but oh my gosh, I can do so much better. And so that's what I take away from all of our conversations. And so I think I'm thankful for the opportunities that I've had in that sense, in research capacity building, but definitely looking ahead to how I can do better.
Fantastic. And I'll start with an apology first, right? So you guys probably looked in the thing. You're like, sweet, there's a panel of 5 women and you realize you're like, Janis. Oh no, Janis, right? So I apologize for being the fifth wheel here, and it's remarkable, right? I mean, I think that I'm 90% incredibly honored to sort of be asked to do this, and 10% totally terrified to be up here to sort of talk about these things, because they're difficult conversations to have, right? And so we'll sort of fairly admit that I think that for many, many years, we've been part of the problem, but like I'm very proud to be sort of part of the solution and try to sort of move some of these things forward. And so we were talking about like how to put this panel together, and it really is about like experience and shared experience, and so what can we learn? And so when I introduce myself, I am a recovering residency program director, right? Like I'm in Residency Program Directors Anonymous once a month, right? So both here in the United States and like overseas too. So I've helped develop kind of numerous large residency training programs, specifically in sub-Saharan Africa. And so, you know, as a residency director, like once a month, you would have your airing of grievances, right? So you have your meeting and you bring your residents together and you're like, hey, what's working well, what's not working well? And so I was at the University of Wisconsin, and you know, it was, hey, we don't get our evaluations on time, and I wish I got more on-shift teaching. And then, you know, there's one brave female resident in the back that says, hey, it would be really, really wonderful if we could set up a like female-to-female peer mentoring program, or like a mentoring program in the residency program. So fast forward 2 months, and I go to Ethiopia, and helping set up the program, they asked me to be like the site visitor, right? Like go back in the program that's now in its 3rd year, talk to the leadership, talk to the residents. And so ironically, you're 8,000 miles away, but I asked like, what are the problems? And they're like, we don't get our evaluations on time. We don't get enough on-shift teaching. And then there's one brave resident in the back saying, I wish we had a better peer-to-peer mentoring program, right? A female-to-female mentoring program. And so you realize, although you're 5,000 miles away, like these are cross-cutting interdisciplinary issues that need to be addressed, whether you're in Madison, Wisconsin, or you're in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. And so one of the things that I learned was here we have some remarkable women physicians and remarkable women leaders in our program at the University of Wisconsin. And so trying to help facilitate that, like it was relatively easy. Although there might not have been a formal system in place, like I didn't have to reinvent the wheel to try to make these things happen, right? It is sort of putting together the system and putting these folks together. That being said, you know, when we talk about Ethiopia, like, there is no emergency medicine. The specialty doesn't exist. There are no faculty members, much less female faculty members, right? And so trying to put all of these pieces together really takes a concerted effort. And so one of the things that I think that I wanted to bring up was these things are not going to happen organically, right? I think that in some of the places we really, really have to think about how do we put the systems together to give our female residents and our female faculty, especially in a system that doesn't necessarily exist. There's not 100 years of physicians that have sort of gone through this, the ability to sort of kind of further develop, and the concept of, you know, it's one thing to be a mentor, but like transitioning from like mentorship to sponsorship. Not just saying, you know, we'll kind of, but really helping connect the dots. And so I only kind of say that in the one lone resident in the back in Ethiopia, right? Like we use a peer-to-peer mentoring program to help her connect the dots. Becomes chief resident, starts her own residency program in Addis Ababa at a different hospital, and 2 months ago is picked by the Ministry of Health to run the entire emergency and trauma care directorate in the country. Right? And so these are things that are, we need to look out for. I do think that in emergency care systems, right? So at my hospital, everything is, to try to change something in a hospital that's 99.9% efficient, you're going to spend $10 million on like cutting some time down by 37 seconds. In emerging healthcare systems, though, there's so much opportunity. There's so much opportunity because it's new and it's undeveloped. And so how we put these systems in place, I think, you are going to get so much bang for your buck by doing these things that it's important that we really put these things like very explicitly out front to make these things happen.
Yeah, I think those are great points, that this isn't just something that's going to happen, but we have to be deliberate, we have to prioritize, we have to be vigilant, and that also the opportunity and that obligation, you know, changes as we move along in our careers. And so kind of thinking about looking for those opportunities or trying to move, you know, make that change, you know, for Jennifer and Catherine and Janis to just start us out, what are some of the barriers that you've run into in trying to empower women in the work that you've done? And also, how can we, I think sometimes we're blind, like we don't know that we're running into a barrier. We don't know that this is really a gender-related issue. How can we be more vigilant about that?
So just a little background on myself. I have a background in humanitarian issues. I started most of my work in public health and humanitarian response and supporting NGOs. I do more work in informatics and data now. But I think what's really telling to me about the discussion that we've had to date and what preceded coming into this room was what I think, Frida, you said, it's, I can do it. You can do it. And I would add on, we can do it. And thinking about what empowerment means, and maybe through one lens, and that would be access to resources. And to move into the humanitarian space, I was working on a program with Oxfam in southern Ethiopia many years ago for where there was a program, and we decided, in retrospect, I realized this is a barrier we tried to address. As we were looking to collect information on public health issues, child malnutrition, and anticipate when there was going to be an impending disaster, drought, or conflict, not always necessarily isolated, but sometimes at the same time. The way that we collectively as a team designed the program was to have communities at the center and women at the center. And I think over time, I think retrospectively looking at what I think is the pipeline of where we can improve empowerment is to understand where those barriers are. And one of the things I hope that we did years ago was taught our women in the villages actually to tell us what they believe and what they know better than anybody else using the visual analog scale. So back to empowerment, access and skills. And so over the years we went from pointing on the visual analog scale to picking up a pencil. And then over time, actually, it was digital transformation. So moved forward 7 years. And I think to your point about the amazing things about seeing people grow in their skills and capacity so that they can move forward and be leaders and be part of the Ministry of Health, we ended up transforming what an area in Ethiopia at that time had minimal electricity, almost no connectivity, and a very, very sort of scarce area of the use of digital technology. And 7 years later, with the same women, we transformed them. They transformed themselves, primarily, with mobile technology tools, and took it, I'm sure, to places that go way far beyond that project, public health, and far beyond.
I think that's a great point. So I think traditionally women might not be as strong in the area of technology, but I think there's other barriers that are sometimes unforeseen, like language. It's quite common that, especially in Tanzania, we do function in English, but a lot of the nurses who are female feel a lot more comfortable in Swahili. And so adopting a culture that is bilingual, so all our meetings are bilingual, will allow them to feel more comfortable in whatever language they choose to speak in and to be able to foster that language barrier. But I think there's so many other smaller areas that we have to pay attention to. So some of the other things are just, I talked a little bit about the gender bias in hiring, and then the ability to know that they can look out for certain roles. So hiring specifically for research, a lot of people, men, are far more likely to come look for a job than women because they feel like they can. So that brings us back to what's typically the cultural of who comes to that door, who comes to the meeting, who thinks they can. And I love your point, I can, we can.
Janis, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, I think, dovetailing on the kind of discussion that we had in the other point is, I think, being very, very forthcoming about creating those opportunities, right? Like not having them happen by accident or by happenstance. And so I think back in our discussions, I'm currently working on a World Bank project called the ACE Impact Project, so the African Centers of Excellence, and we're building higher education in Africa. And so one of the things, the core principal tenets of the entire $300 and some million project that the World Bank is giving out is like, we are looking to train women. That it's like point number one, right? So it's unbelievably explicit on like, this is what the goals of this project are, right? And so it's understood to like every Ministry of Health, every Ministry of Education. It basically is a project that focuses on like results-based financing. So it's not like you just get a $10 million grant, right? Like we do here in the United States. They might give you 10% up front, and they say, when you start doing things, you will get the rest of the money, right? So for every female applicant that they get into the master's program, it's $10,000. Every female applicant that they put through a PhD program, it's $25,000. Every regional program. So being very, very, very explicit up front about like, this is what we are trying to do, and sort of developing those opportunities that might not otherwise just sort of grow organically, right? I think that we haven't figured it out here yet. I think that some of the challenges that all of you guys have articulated, and LMICs even becomes a more, it's more important to sort of have that articulated out front. So.
I just want to go back to one thing. We've talked about it a little bit, but there's two forms of empowerment. There's high-income country female empowerment to do what we do, and there's also empowerment for our low-income country collaborators. And as you said from the beginning, I don't think they're that important, but I think that they're so helpful for each other to build upon each other. And then the next thing that brings up is some responsibility, right? So I feel a responsibility because those have helped me come to where I am. I feel a responsibility to continue that for those, not only in high-income settings, but in low-income settings. And there might be very many blind spots in terms of how to do that and when to do that, but I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts about how to do that, or other leadership opportunities or discussions of those.
I have a question for you, though, to follow up on that, though, of kind of blind spots. So one of the things that I think I struggle with a little bit as I do work is the confluence of being of differential power, right? So kind of ideas of imperialism or colonialism, however you want to name it, as we go and do work from HICs to LMICs, and actually how that intersects with gender, right? So just to like share a story, I remember when it was one of the very first weeks I was training a brand new research team in Gujarat, India. And my team is just 5 young women, never done research like this, comes up to me and, kind of doesn't really look me in the eye and says, they won't let us eat lunch. And I was like, wait, what? And there was a cafeteria there. They're supposed to be able to get lunch. And I knew, like, none of these people know who I am, you know, none of the people that work there. But I also knew that, like, as the obviously American in the room, I could just walk up and say, hey, with a big smile on my face, what's the problem? What's happening today? And there was no more problem, right? I could just simple ways of advocating. But at the same time, I was kind of exercising that role as a foreigner to push things forward. And, you know, and by the end of the summer, I think through some of the research and the work that we do, they found their own voice and they can negotiate those systems at the end. But how do we, in other situations, whether it's day-to-day moments like that or in meetings where we have the chance to speak up and say, you know what, I want to include that person. What have you seen in kind of negotiating that differential power of being HIC to LMIC, but also gender-wise?
That's a difficult one. I don't know if you guys have it. Yeah, it's a great question. So I think that the first step is recognize we have that power. And then once you know that you have that power, understand what the impact is, obviously before we use it. But then we do have a responsibility to model that behavior that we want to do, as well as to use that power if we can to empower others to do the same. So I love your example and how you were able to recognize that just by saying hi, you're able to bring people to that table to have the discussion of why is there this difference and there shouldn't be this in this situation, and straighten out to something that's more equitable. So I think that's a great idea and concept, but problematic also if we don't think about the sort of the impact of it beforehand.
Yeah.
I would say in addition to, I think there's two lenses. One is, you know, similar to the examples that were already discussed. It's like being able to advocate for a meal or something more than that, or a role in a research project. I do think, from my experiences in the humanitarian sector, for which there is longevity and sustainability through that environment, but it's fraught with challenges. And so when thinking about power and people and change, some of the things that I found is that part of the role that you might play if you're in one side of the power differential is to slow down and step back for just a moment when you can. And it's very difficult in a disaster to do that, but it can actually be really important, because for me personally, there are many times where I thought I knew what needed to happen next, and I was asked to maybe just take a pause, or I said maybe I should take a pause. And that pause and the space that you might be able to create to step back out of that space because somebody else will step in makes all the difference sometimes, and it can be pivotal. And then I think in addition to that, that's like that learned space. Wow, I slowed down, I step back. It's almost like emergency medicine when you learn, like, I have a couple seconds to step back at this trauma bay and then make a really dedicated decision, or somebody else comes in and makes a better recommendation. I think in the humanitarian sector, and probably within this environment too, as we learn to slowly build that in a position of power, whatever power structure that may be, gender, culture, anything else, political power, I think it can have some great benefits.
And I think with power comes responsibility, right? And so whether you're a residency program director or a chair, or you're running a research program or something like that, with power comes responsibility. And so I go back to the mentorship to sponsorship, right? So you can be sort of a mentor, but what does that mean? You have to actually do something with that power or that mentorship ability. And so I will use sort of the analogy of, we brought up a story. So again, resident X wants fellowship, is interested in fellowship, PEDS fellowship here. And so, you know, as a residency program director, I knew all the fellowship directors, so I scheduled a happy hour at 3, at 4, at 5, and at 6 with the fellowship directors. And I was like, resident X, you stop by at 3:02, 4:02, 5:02, and 6:02 to accidentally run into the fellowship directors. And so, like, those things don't happen by accident. I think you have a responsibility to, both here and in LMICs, to take it to the next step, right? It can't just be like, I'm your mentor, like, tell me what you want. Like, there needs to be follow through in sort of whatever that development piece is, right? And so I think that we really need to sort of contemplate how to do that. And you're right, like the power dynamics between that are incredibly challenging.
And as we think about next steps, you know, Kelli, Frida, I wonder if you could start us off, but really would like to hear from all of the panel. I mean, both of you are kind of have upcoming transitions. You know, Kelli, in a year and a half, you'll be our next GEMA president or president-elect. Frida, you are finishing residency in a year, okay? And you're going to be an attending and in that position to empower other women. So what are the next steps that you'll take in those positions, and what is it that SAEM can do to empower women as we grow and help kind of write that story of emergency medicine in LMICs?
Yeah, of course, emergency medicine in our country is a new field, and so far we have like 10 years from after being recognized as a professional, and we have few mentors, female mentors. So, of course, thanks to me, but I know Catherine. She's a mentor to me, but I think I'll be mentor to many female African. They will look at me more than white, maybe. So, yeah. So I think this is a great opportunity to be an emergency physician, and I think you could. We need a lot of support. Of course, I'm going to finish, but I've been being sponsored with a Duke for all of my. Of course, that is a great opportunity because you study without any stress, because we are not paid. We are not paid in our country, so you do all of fees and a lifetime and everything you do by your own. So if you could sponsor many female. I think of course, it's encouraging people to come to the emergency field because they know they have support of about fee, they're not stressed. That's one. And then number two, for me, I like in pediatric emergency and mostly ultrasound. Because I can see before the residence, ultrasound is an investigation for us. So you request it. So after being in a residence, we use as a tools at the bedside. So I can see the changes when you do ultrasound. This patient need fluid. I can do ultrasound. This patient, it's just a matter of doing ultrasound at the bedside. So I need you to give us support on a resource on ultrasound. Like, of course, that's the ultrasound I like. But there's a lot of things to support for us, especially in low middle income countries. We have well, of course, our hospital have just opened the emergency last year. So we need a big support, not only about resource and the human resource also. Yeah, I think that's we need a big support, is to empower women to go on, to stand alone later as our emergency female physician.
And how will you help women stay on and empower women around you?
Of course, I can be a role model to them. It's easier to look at you because we are same color, maybe we are speaking the Swahili language. It's easier to encourage them. So I think that's a big support to them. Telling them you can do it. Because they saw me, they knew I can do it because they knew, of course I know a lot of female, so they look at me as a role model. If the Frida can do it, also we can do it. Yeah, so I think I can be a good example to others. Like, of course, many of the African countries, they don't have emergency, so I can be good, not even in our countries. We can stand as in African also, yeah. Yeah, so it's good to be told by your fellow you can do it. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, thank you.
And I am reminded being here this week of what an amazing opportunity we have within SAEM. I mean, truly, we're more than 6,000 members. we come together to think of how can we improve acute care delivery through research, training, education. And we all do that in different ways. Some of us are in program development or education. Some of us do research and try to disseminate publications so we can spread the findings. We have consultants, we have policy writers and implementers. So we really are a powerful, powerful group. And through that, I think there's a few important ways that we can think about empowering women in the years ahead. And the first is to raise awareness, just by having the discussion. Just coming together, as I said before, even being a part of this panel and this discussion has changed the way I'm perceiving what I'm doing already. And so if we can broaden that discussion and make it more frequent and more powerful, more loud, then I think we're going to make a difference in that way. The second way is by sharing resources. With all of our academies and interest groups, and also just our departments. I mean, for instance, maternity leave policies. Like, how many people have reached out to another department and said, what is your policy? And how many, and do you guys work night shifts for how long? And just sharing that policy is helpful, because then you can come back and come up, what is a best practice in that sense? And now I want to share it with Frida, because she was telling me they didn't have one. So I think we have this unique opportunity in SAEM specifically to share resources. And finally, we should be inspiring each other. We can inspire each other to do better. And there is no better opportunity than this forum in itself, because as we figure out what worked for us and what challenges we had the opportunity to overcome, we should then come together and share these stories. And in that way, we can inspire each other to really keep taking steps forwards in ways that we didn't think about initially. So it's awesome to be a part of this group, having this discussion, and then to think about how can we broaden the conversation and invite more people into it.
Jennifer, anything you want to add?
So I wanted to add just to find, to be, and to support allies. So whenever one person says something, it's only one person. But when you have a team of people or a panel of people sort of voicing in the same direction, it becomes so much stronger with so many different perspectives. And I think that's hugely helpful. And especially once we think to bring that to a low and middle income setting, to function as a catalyst of change. Our local people will be the catalyst, but we can always be their allies. And that's something I think I would be honored to do, to continue to do.
And I think, you know, we sat around yesterday at Starbucks trying to figure out, like, what are going to be the points? Like, what do people need to leave this room knowing? And so, you know, I wrote down a few things, and it was just like humility, right? So having humility in sort of these discussions. They're incredibly difficult sometimes, but like having humility, like being receptive to feedback and like understanding sort of the context and like the communications that you have between female-female mentors or male-female mentors, or those relationships, right, that are complicated, and having like really good sort of feedback. And then I think the one thing that I took back that I wrote down and I circled and I looked back this morning is like taking barriers away. Right, like we have to take the barriers away to kind of move this forward. And so some of them like might be unbelievably simple. Some of them like might be very, very structurally difficult and 100 years of all of the things that we've sort of talked about, but some of them aren't, right? And so taking those barriers away in this discussion, I think that becomes super duper important.
Just a few things to add. It's one thing that is an opportunity for all of us in this room, and certainly for me, is to think of ourselves and think of yourselves as a change maker, because you probably already are. But through this lens, it's about how can we continue to have that dialogue. If there's something that sort of rang a bell or is an itch on what we talked about or what's on your head, think about how you can broaden that part of the conversation in the spaces that you work in your workspace, in a low middle income country elsewhere. Second is, from a change maker standpoint, in order to sort of do the short-term things and really have the sustainability for the long term, is feel strong. You can do it, we can do it. Push yourself to the comfortable edge of change. And everybody's journey will be different. The times will be different. But if we all do it at our own paces, we'll see a lot more change in the long term. And be an ally. Look for allies. And the last thing I would say is be good to yourself and be patient. Because the road is long but really good, and there are times that there will be hiccups and barriers along the way. There'll be other times where there'll be super successes, and it's wonderful, but the road will be long. So nonetheless, be kind and be patient and be good, because we'll all sort of get to that longer-term goal, with that in place.
So I want to thank the panelists for your time and your insights and your stories, and thanks to our home institutions that support us to be here, especially Duke for supporting Frida to come here as well. But we have a minute or two for questions before we wrap up, if anyone has any questions for the panelists. Okay.
I'll ask one. So
Never afraid.
So maybe 15 years ago, we made this huge effort around engaging our partner to train a lot of women to be EMTs and then educators of EMTs. And actually went from the first group where we arrived, they'd already chosen a group, which was actually 100% male, to where we get to 50%. And what we've seen is through cultural issues and things like that, despite the ongoing, what I believe is a commitment from the partner, that 50% is gradually dwindled down to maybe 17 to 20% now, among the 15,000 or so EMTs, and the trainers maybe down around the same. I'm an impatient person, and we're going to keep grinding on that problem in all of the ways that we talked about, which I think, but is there anything that you've seen that acts as a real accelerant where we can bend the art in a different manner rather than put some models in place and wait for a generational change and hopefully cultural change? Like something that really, have you seen anything where you can make a rapid change when there's a lot of cultural barriers? And I'll be patient, I can die off, things will get better, but
Not anytime soon.
anything we can do before I die off? Yeah, but not that long.
Yeah.
No, but I think that's a great, I think some of these things are so interesting, right? So when we talk about like promotion, we're an academic institution. We are applying a paradigm from 1870 to our promotion and tenure now, right? Like it has to change. I think that if we look at sort of like quality, I was thinking about like the quality improvement movement, right? Where nobody really knew what it was 25 years ago, and like that is how we implement change everywhere now. And so, when we talk about, again, systems that are efficient or inefficient, right? So we, quick quality improvement project in Ethiopia where the resident's just sitting and the other resident talks about like, I wonder why it takes so long to get our labs back. And he's like, oh, this is a perfect, right? Like you do your PDCA cycle and you realize you're like, well, it's 30 different languages that people are speaking. There's 15 different dialects. 60% of the population can't read when you give them the slip. And so he went home and he went to Home Depot and he bought a $5 roll of red tape. And then he went back to Ethiopia and he put it on the floor from the pickup spot to the lab. And he's like, walk on the red line and come back on the red line. And they decreased lab turn, it's 95%, right? So when we talk about like the opportunity in an inefficient system, like there's a ton of opportunity. And using sort of the lessons learned from like quality improvement, I think, and some of the how to, when we talk about taking barriers away, that's what I always get from the quality improvement, is how do you take barriers away to sort of effectively change, right? And so maybe looking at some of the quality folks to do that.
Can I add?
Sure.
So, not knowing your classes, I'm sure it's very helpful. Two things, if you look at like, how do we get more speakers at national meetings? Put women on the speaker committee. So, who your selection committee is, make that the neurodiversity team that you want, and that will begin to reflect downward. But here's one of the things, sex and other girl, I learned, change gender to value neurodiversity and make the argument for neurodiversity. Because it takes some of this implicit bias off the table and reframes the conversation and gets you the results, which is a neurodiverse team and getting people more opportunities.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent point about how we have the conversation to make movement forward. Yes.
More random Do I really need to have a microphone? A random thought then. What if for every associate professor, the institution got $10,000, the associate professor that was a woman. For every full professor in your department, you got $50,000. If that professor was a woman, if the professor was not, don't get anything. Just what if?
Dr. Williams, did you?
I want to come back to how you change the needle and how you move the needle. So just kind of reflecting back to my experience when I was a resident, you know, we had one full-time woman faculty member at my institution. She was the program director. And she had 3 sons. I didn't exactly mean to follow in her footsteps exactly, but I'm now the program director and I have 3 sons. Bizarre, but true. All right. But now we have a remarkable number of women faculty, and the role modeling has changed. The times of being the only woman on the team and waiting outside the men's surgery locker room for the team to come out and them having forgotten about you are gone. I just want to kind of keep the hope alive because I have my youngest son, when a few years ago looked at me and he came up to me and says, "Mom, I think I want to be a doctor, but I'm not sure if men can be doctors. Would it be okay if I became a doctor?" Because all of the role modeling that he had seen were women physicians. So it can change in one generation if you show that it can be done, right? And you follow through.
Yeah. So, oh, go ahead.
I don't know. I think I would urge a little caution with financial incentives to institutions for women. And that's not from like any place where I don't think that would be a valuable contribution to enhance this. But as someone that's dealt with imposterism for a long time, you kind of want to remove that appearance like, oh, well, they just got hired on as the assistant professor because they're going to get money for it. You know, and you can have those kind of backfiring logistics. And I think that it kind of removes the basic foundation of we want to be equal, we want to create something better, we want to do something better together. And I think that's kind of just an important thing to think about with, you know, all these, you know, initiatives.
Yeah, and I think that kind of brings us to, you know, kind of closing this out of, this is an incredibly complex issue, right? Whether you're doing this here in the U.S., or you're doing this in LMICs, there are issues of power, of entrenchment, of gender, of opportunity, right? And what I just want to kind of bring this back to is, as you guys have shared stories, which I really appreciate, is again, emergency medicine is at the beginning. We have the chance to do some things right that we haven't done right here before, right? And part of that is about continuing this conversation. I ask that you share your stories with us. I ask that you think about what are the next steps, whether you're at kind of the different points that we are in your career, whether you're a trainee, there is always an opportunity. But it's about being vigilant and it's about being deliberate. So I appreciate the time that you guys have shared with us today, and I thank you, and I hope to speak with more of you soon. Thanks.